in addition to that, we may also have release management that is driving a change, since release management is the oversight for change management, which is another topic at another time. But here again, we have the registration of the change. We want to do the proper planning and then obtain our approval. And then once we've done that, then we go about implementing the change. And you'll notice that in the process model, we distinguish the difference between infrastructure and application changes. And really the primary difference here is that with applications, we typically have a test environment where we don't always have that in an infrastructure change. So this allows us to make adjustments in our test or development environment, and then once the change has been proven successful, then we can roll that out to production. And then ultimately, once the change has been implemented, we can then close that. But at any point you're looking at this documentation, this is all, if you're on the most current version of FootPrints, which is 11.6, you can delve into, for example, the change registration, and here you're seeing the steps that a change coordinator would take when registering that change. Also, the decision points that are available to us. So here again, this is one of the newer features that have been added to FootPrints in the latest version. So again, let's just kind of walk through a typical change and see some of the things that we would want to do as part of a good change process. So first of all, when registering a new change, we can do this a couple of ways. We can manually register everything, or we might use templates, quick templates to register common or standard changes. And this is something that I highly encourage because it does a couple of things. One, it allows us to have a process that we can consistently follow for the type of change that we're implementing. So here I have, for example, a network change, and so if we select that template, you'll notice that we have a title that's predefined. Now all of this can be adjusted, so you don't feel like you have to only use the data and the information that's provided through the template. So this is a standard network change. More specifically, we might want to just give some indication here in the title as to what this change is related to. So here we're going to update the BIOS on Dallas routers. Okay, and then with that, we want to indicate the change workflow. So this is a normal change or a standard change, if you will, and certainly if this were emergency change, we might indicate it as such. Right now, the status is appropriate for open, and then our priority is medium. So with that, what are the reasons for the change? So is this an incident or problem resolution? Are we making an enhancement? So you might want to think about documenting the reasons for the change. This can be pretty telling as to why changes are implemented. And again, we want to minimize chaos, and so identifying that there's a problem is one of the first steps in doing that. And so again, having adequate reasons can certainly help in that regard. So at this point, we're going to propose, we're doing this BIOS upgrade because there is an incident or a problem that has already occurred. With that, what's the category? Well, this is a hardware-related issue, and then we can also select the impact. Notice here we have minor, significant, and major. So we'll select the significant because this is certainly impacting the network performance with the issue that we've experienced. In terms of scope, well, what is the scope of this change? Here again, these are just some fields that you might want to consider implementing for the purposes of your risk and impact analysis. And so at this point, this is certainly going to impact a large percentage of customers, so we're going to indicate the 1,000 plus. And then with that, implementation date. Well, this is where we start we start to think about the planning process of planning the change. And so before we submit this for approval, it certainly would be helpful to those individuals approving it to know when you're thinking of doing this type of implementation. So we want to include an implementation date. And at this point, let's say that that's going to be this coming Saturday, or better yet, maybe next Saturday. One of the things that we can use the validation rules and the form customization to drive certain behaviors. So if we need to make these fields required, which all of these fields that are indicated in red are required, we can do so. But in addition to that, we can also prompt users for additional information based upon their selections and so forth. So we also need to indicate a primary contact. And so in this case, we're going to say Bill Braxton is our primary contact for this particular change because he is, for example, my manager, and that's fine that there are no assets associated with that user, because ultimately one of the things that we will end up doing is using the CI link to indicate the actual assets that are in our configuration management database will indicate which of those that we're changing. Now, this particular template has an asset already defined, this router, our configuration item already defined. So that is just part of the template that you can build. But at the same time, if you want to manually link assets through keyword searches or using the advanced search in the configuration management database, it's already been stated that this contact has no devices associated with them, so that wouldn't be helpful. So let's just look here at our advanced search. And so this is where we start taking a peek into the configuration management database, and at this point I can filter out a list of all of the items, or I can use some of my predefined searches, such as the network CIs. And at that point, there's our router that we have in our configuration management database, and it's already linked. In addition to linking that asset, it is also worth noting that if we want to see the details, which again, when we start talking about planning of this change, it is relevant to identify the details and look at the details of this asset so that we can, again, do the proper impact analysis. So if we look here in the CI record in our configuration management database, we'll notice that this particular asset is linked to 15 other incidents that are already that have already been registered, but we can also see things like relationships to other assets, relationships to and from other assets, should I say, as well as the total number of relationships. And so here we can see a little bit more detailed information about that. But more importantly, upon viewing these relationships, we can then take a visual perspective of the configuration management database and see those assets, visually. We also have, so again, this is all information that's made available to us through the configuration management database. And so when you talk about when you start talking about change management, it's typically very soon that you'll have the discussion of, well, do I need a CMDB? What should be populated in my configuration management database? And is a CMDB absolutely required for change management? No, but it's certainly going to make life a lot easier when you can see these relationships that exist and understand what else you might be impacting by applying that service pack to the server. So is it required? No, but it certainly is something that will increase that quality perspective of the change.
Ron, we're at 25 after.
Yep, thank you, Valerie. I just noticed that. So with that, other things that if you're not taking advantage of, but certainly should, and is part of the change management licensing of change management, is the approval engine that's part of FootPrints. And so, actually, it's telling me I need a description, so we'll indicate just something there. And then, so again, once we have done the proper impact analysis and have done the proper documentation, at that point we can submit the change for approval and have it go through the necessary steps. So here again, we can assign one or multiple levels of approval to different teams or individuals. And so when you start talking about regulatory compliance, this is certainly a part of that, making sure that you've gotten the appropriate approvals before implementing the change. And again, if this is something that you don't own today with your FootPrints licensing, you certainly may want to invest in that. And based upon those approvals, as part of that template that we had previously selected, you can see that there are a number of tasks that have been created and assigned to the appropriate individuals or teams. So here again, we can take these or make these tasks follow a specific workflow and process, or if it's not necessary to have these executed in a specific order, we can ignore that. But typically, we would want to sequence our subtask to make sure that we are doing the proper assessment. And then ultimately, once that assessment has been completed, we're implementing the changes and doing the necessary follow-up tasks.